The year was
Yeah.
1988. And the problem I was facing was, how do you take a bunch of barely post-adolescent nincompoops and get them to close the
Yeah.
richest, toughest, most sophisticated investors in the world, which were basically the top 1% of all US business owners.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's masterclass by President Summit, where we will address the principles for distance selling mastery with none other than Jordan Belfort himself, the Wolf of Wall Street, the #1 sales trainer in the world, and the best-selling author. Jordan, thank you so much for being here. It's a real pleasure.
My pleasure.
My name is Frederick. I'm the CEO of the President Summit, and I can't tell you just how pleased I am about this webinar, where more than 3,000 people are right now tuning in from around the world for today's masterclass. So a warm welcome to Mexico, New York City, Toronto, Dubai, Sweden, Paris. It seems that we have the whole world with us today, Jordan. So that's very, very exciting. The masterclass will be roughly around an hour, where Jordan and I have some questions which we will address, and Jordan will share his insights into how you mastered the sell. It's a preview of what you can expect at Northern Europe's leading business conference, President Summit, on the 23rd and 24th of November. And we will also have an exclusive offer at the end because Jordan is here and with us today. So definitely stay tuned for that. It will include an additional gift. Before giving the word to Jordan, I want to say that throughout the entire webinar, you are more than welcome to ask any questions you have in the Q&A section. You can upvote these, and Jordan and I will try to address as many of them when he's finished with his actionable insights and his pointers there. And in the handout section as well, we will share the link to Jordan's website, our brochure, and we will also make sure to send it to you afterwards so you don't have to stress about it during this call. Without further ado, let's get to it. Jordan, I gave a brief intro of you, but do you mind sharing a bit more information about yourself before we delve into to the action here?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think probably most people have seen the movie. Unless you're tuning in from Iran or North Korea, you've probably seen it, right? And I think one of the things that the movie, depicts accurately was the fact that I was able to take these young kids who were not that sharp, not very educated, not natural born closers, and then quickly transform them into this, elite squad of some of the best closers in the world. And one of the things the movie doesn't, though, break down is the process in which I discovered how to do that. And what was happening, what triggered me to come up with a system that came to be known as the straight line system. So there's a system that I teach right now around the world. I teach it to large corporations, Fortune 500 companies, all the way down to moms and pops, and individuals buy the program too. And it's equally effective in any industry. It works in any industry. And it's funny, nowadays we talk about this thing called distance selling or distance persuasion, right? Because it's something that's a reality we didn't have to deal with before, where, you can't always get in front of someone right now. Coronavirus has changed that. So while we used to be able to do that, we can't now. So that's really what I want to delve into today, is really how I invented the system, and what are and what you could take away from that in terms of in your own businesses that will allow you to quickly adjust the way your salespeople are going about trying to close sales. And I think you get a lot of value out of it very quickly. So that's my introduction.
Absolutely. And it's fantastic to have so many people tune in from around the world. I saw Asia as well, in Palm Beach in Florida. So welcome to all of you. And without further ado, Jordan, I actually want to hand the mic to you and sort of start off by telling your story and your whole theory behind your sale. How do you structure it, and what's the best advice you've gotten, and all these things. So take it away. I'll chap in when we have some questions along the way.
Great. So basically, the short story is, we got to keep it short because I love to talk, right? Is that, I was facing a problem. The year was
Yeah.
1988. And the problem I was facing was, how do you take a bunch of barely post-adolescent nincompoops and get them to close the
Yeah.
richest, toughest, most sophisticated investors in the world, which were basically the top 1% of all US business owners. These were people that had large portfolios, they dealt with numbers, multiple brokers, they made
Yeah.
their own decisions quickly, they didn't want to be jerked around, and they could very easily tell someone who was the real deal versus someone who was not. So I had about 12 stockbrokers working for me in the beginning, and they were kids that had, barely clawed their way out of high school. They were no members of the Lucky Sperm Club there, so to speak, right? They were the kids that had essentially, been told by their parents they were never capable of greatness. They weren't capable of greatness, and any greatness they naturally had in them had been pretty much conditioned out of them since the day they were born. First by their own parents, then by their school teachers, by their friends, the media. And by the time they really made it into my boardroom, they've been conditioned to survive, not to thrive. They weren't thinking like winners. They didn't possess that certain amount of self-confidence, self-belief that's so crucial for a salesperson, right? And
Yeah.
when I first hired them, I was selling penny stocks to average moms and pops. That was the model. And I had gotten that model from a company I worked at that you saw in the movies. A great scene from the movie where you watch that first day. I go in there and I close that sale. And, all these other kids are like, how'd you do that? They never see anything like it. Because I had also worked at a big company before that and was forced to make the switch from the big company, LF Rothschild, to a smaller company after the market crashed. So I ended up at the small company, became the top broker there, and that was selling penny stocks to average moms and pops. Eventually, I started my own company, and it was about 3 months into starting my own company, and I was selling penny stocks to these average moms and pops, and the kids that worked for me were doing well. They were making about $10,000 a month, which was pretty good back then in 1988. It's a lot of money.
Certainly.
And what happened is I was doing well, and then just one day I'm lying in bed. I'm like, wait a second, why am I calling people that are basically poor? Why call poor people? Why not call the richest 1% of Americans? And the thing is that when I started this big firm where they were calling wealthy investors, and then I went to the small firm. When I first went to the small firm that was selling penny stocks to average moms and pops, I asked the owner, I said, why are you calling poor people? Like, why can't I sell these stocks to the rich people? They'll buy much bigger amounts. And he's like, rich people don't buy penny stocks. And I'm like, why? Is it because they just don't? Now, normally, I would have probably argued that point because intuitively it didn't make sense to me. Rich people like to speculate. Why wouldn't they speculate, right? But at that point, I was so broke. I was down on my luck. I said, all right, just give me a stack of leads. And I started calling. And I started calling the poor people and doing great and making a lot of money. So now, flash forward, I open up my own firm. I have 12 people. We're calling average moms and pops. And I get this idea. I'm like, wait a second, why not try to do this with rich people? So I went out and I bought a list of the richest 1% of Americans. It was a database called Dun & Bradstreet. And I bought these leads and I started trying to call through these leads and sell them penny stocks. And to my shock, none of them would buy. They would not buy. And I was really surprised by that. So I said to myself, wait a second, maybe it's the fact that they're penny stocks. They're priced too low. How good could something be that's 10 cents a share? So I did what's called a reverse split and split the stock up to $6 a share. So now it was a higher price stock, same stock, but at a higher price. Maybe they would like that better. And to my shock, once again, they still didn't really bite. And that really confused me because, I'd watched on Wall Street how you could call people on the phone. And guys, just so you understand, my original training in sales was door-to-door selling, face-to-face selling. And I had a meat and seafood business that had 26 trucks on the road going door to door. And I went bankrupt when I was very young because I made a lot of mistakes as a businessman. I overexpanded. I was undercapitalized. I was growing on credit, made a lot of classic mistakes. And when I first heard about this, position as a stockbroker and that you'd get people to give you money to invest, I assumed you'd be knocking on their doors and going door to door. When I was told that you actually go into you call them on the phone, I was like, really? And people would send you millions. It didn't make sense to me. Why would someone send you that much money on a telephone call, someone you never met before? It seemed impossible. But sure enough, when I walked into this boardroom, it was LF Rothschild, a big New York Stock Exchange member firm, a very venerable name, LF Rothschild, the Rothschild Bank. I watched in awe as people would call on the phone and people would send in money, millions of dollars. Shocked me. It totally shocked me. And I was hooked. And I trained for 6 months and I watched all that happen. So just so you understand, this idea of distance selling, to a person that has never done it before, it seems like, how could you really sell as effectively on a telephone call if you're used to people coming into your office or going to their home? I can assure you that once you know how to do it, distance selling is even easier than selling face to face. It is, because with the phone, you can hit so many people and you save so much time. And at the end of the day, especially once you know the straight line system, because the straight line system, what it does, it essentially closes that gap between the ability to influence face to face and when over the phone. See, when you're face to face with someone, there's lots of other things that come into play. The ability to create massive rapport using body language. And there's a certain interpersonal energy, interpersonal communications that people who might not that be great at selling and influence, but they're very good when you get them into someone's homes. They're very good at schmoozing and building rapport and all these things that, while they're not really efficient ways of closing someone, they do actually make it easier for someone who's at a lower level of training with persuasion to pull it off. So you can almost squeak by getting into their house. You can accomplish some things that could have more easily been accomplished by calling them on the phone and selling the right way. But because most people don't know how to sell correctly on the phone, they're forced to go to people's homes. Meanwhile, the amount of money you can make on the phone is 10 times greater than you could ever make going door to door. And that's a fact. Because I've done both, right? I would never, ever in a million years consider selling anything door to door again. And I do train door-to-door salesmen, just so you know. I spoke at the door-to-door convention last year. I train many people on how to do the hybrid model of first you call them, then go into the house. So I do it all. But I'll tell you, nothing, and I mean nothing, is going to rival the pure elegance of being able to use the telephone or a Zoom call like this, where you can actually see somebody, right? Nothing's going to rival that. So again, I watched this happen the first day back in 1988. I was shocked, and ultimately, I was, became, an expert at it myself. And when I opened up my firm, those first 12 people, I had created a system, and the system I created didn't have a name, but it was a very effective system at sales and persuasion. It had to do with tonality, sounding good, overcoming objections, knowing how to, sound like an expert, so to speak. That was sort of sounding good on the phone, making a good presentation, overcoming objections. And the system, again, did not have a name, but it was good enough to call average moms and pops and close them on $500 of a penny stock or $1,000. In other words, it's very different if you're selling something that's almost like an impulse sale to an unsophisticated person who's really not that smart. Yeah, you could sell them $300, $500, but through what I call hype and bullshit. Oh, it's great, you got to try it. And just hype, right? And you impulse someone emotionally to buy something on the phone. That breaks down when you're going to call someone who's worth 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 or $100 million and try to sell them $500,000 of a stock, where they have to make a real investment in something or a very important software program that's going to, make or break the success of their company, or, any type of machine or any program, product, good, or service that's not just a very small amount of money that people buy on impulse. When it comes to selling things that require more forethought, you can't get by on hype and bullshit. You can't get by on creating emotion alone. There's got to be a very, very strong logical component as well. And also, if at any moment in time the person feels like they're not dealing with an expert, you're done. You can't close anybody. So I watched this play out. I watched this happen from my own eyes, where I had these 12 kids. They were selling penny stocks to average moms and pops using a system I created that didn't have a name, and they were doing really well. They were making $10,000 plus a month, right?
Absolutely.
Then I come up with this idea. I'm like, wait a second. Why am I calling poor people? I should be calling rich people, right? It's a bad analogy. There's all saying, why do bank robbers rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Well, why would you call rich people? Because they have the money. Why call someone with no money and say invest money, right? Not that we're trying to steal it, but the point is you call people with money if you want to raise money. So I tried to sell the penny stock. It didn't work. Rich people did not want to buy penny stocks. I tried to sell a $6 stock. And to my shock, my real shock there, rich people didn't want to buy $6 stocks. So I thought about that, right? And at the time, my brokers were just, I tested the idea myself first, right? So they were still calling average moms and pops. And I kind of realized what was going on. I had this revelation one day. I said, okay, I get it. When I was calling from LF Rothschild, right? That's a very well-respected name. Everyone I was calling had heard the name Rothschild. It was a well-respected banking name. They knew the company. When we were pitching a stock, it was typically a stock like Microsoft, it would be IBM, General Motors, it was a very well-respected company that you would start off selling. And then you'd be calling them, you were a stranger. So two of those three things, were in your favor. They had heard of your company, and they already heard of the stock that you were recommending. So two things correct. One thing, they don't know you. So 2 out of 3, you were able to close them. But now what I was trying to do at Stratton Securities, which no one had ever heard of, you're calling from a company they never heard of, trying to sell a stock called Ventura Entertainment they never heard of, from a broker they never heard of. 3 strikes and you're out. And that was what was happening. So because I had 3 things working against me, couldn't close. As good as I was on the phone, even I couldn't close them, right? So I said, let me try to change things up a bit here. And I used what's called a loss leader strategy. I said, look, instead of calling them up and trying to sell them on a company they never heard of before, let me start off with a well-known company like IBM or Eastman Kodak back then. Eastman Kodak was a big Fortune 500, one of the bluest of the blue chip companies, cameras, right, and film, right? And I decided that I would start with that versus a stock they never heard of. So that would take one thing and tip it back in my favor. In addition, I was, instead of saying, hey, it's Jordan Belfort calling from Stratton Securities, you never heard of us, we're a small, tiny firm that no one knows. I said to them, hey, I'm calling from Stratton. You might not have heard of Stratton because the last 10 years, we were strictly an institutional block trading firm dealing with a select group of banks, insurance companies, and pension funds. We've recently opened up our doors to the more substantial private investor. And I just want to say some information. Now, that was actually true because I had bought Stratton from someone else. They'd been in business for 10 years, and they were traders, just block trading between banks, insurance companies. They were just doing trading. So while that wasn't what it was doing now, I said for the last 10 years, we were strictly XYZ. So what I really call that is the truth well told. Like there's many ways to explain what did Stratton do. One way you say, yeah, we're a small, tiny firm that no one's ever heard of. It's never had any success before. That's probably the worst thing you could say about your company. Or you could say for the last 10 years, he was strictly an institutional block trading firm dealing with a select group of banks, insurance companies, and pension funds. They're like, wow, that sounds pretty good, right? So it's about coming up with a way to describe your situation. And I don't care what company you have, whether you're big or small, you can always find a way to cast your company in the best light without having to lie. So it's not a question of trying to, I would never recommend that you make something up. Don't do that. What I'm saying is look at what you have, look at your company, you come up with the best possible explanation of either why they've heard of you or why they haven't heard of you and what you do. And because of that, I essentially reframed this idea that you haven't heard of us before, but it's actually a positive because we just opened up our doors to the more substantial private investor like yourself. And I'd say, Mr. Jones, all I want to do right now is send you some information on our company, show you exactly what we do, and then get back to you down the road. Next time we're making a recommendation to our core clients. Does that sound fair enough? And they're like, sure, send me the information. So that was, so I now reframed why they don't know Stratton, and I'm not selling them when I call them back. I'm not going to sell them a $5 stock. I'm going to sell them Eastman Kodak, which they knew. Well, sure enough, when I tried that and I wrote this really great pitch for Eastman Kodak, I started closing accounts like crazy. A lot of accounts. And I had my junior partner, Danny, doing this with me. And at the same time, I was running, my firm was still out there. The 12 kids was still in parallel calling average moms and pops. I learned better. I learned at this point not to like throw out the whole thing. So let me first perfect my idea before I had them switch because it was working small, right?
Absolutely.
Anyway,
And Jordan,
yeah.
Jordan, I wanna quickly hop in here because there's so many great insights, and we're getting tons of questions from the Q&A section and also in the comment section, which is absolutely fantastic. So please keep them coming. Jordan, one of the questions that we've received is how do you typically build your pitch? What do you structure it around?
Repeat that.
How do you, one of the questions that we received is that, how do you typically build your pitch? Like when you sell over the phone, you're talking about how do you structure that pitch?
Well, that's what whether you know it or not, I've been actually teaching you that during that story. So in that story is the secret. So if you to get to the punchline here of that story is how you structure a pitch. Because at the end of the day, sales, there's an overarching concept to the straight line system, which is that every sale is the same. Every sale is the same, right? And let me keep going forward because you'll see very quickly what happened here, and it will explain it to you in a much more memorable way than if I just explain a fact to you. So let me continue on and tell you what happened. So my junior partner and I started opening up accounts at Eastman Kodak, and we started opening up accounts in Kodak and started opening them like crazy. Then we called them back a week later to try to sell them the $6 stock second. So rather than trying to sell them a $6 stock first, we sold them a well-known company first, and then the $6 stock second. The average trade in penny stocks on a $6 stock to an average mom and pop would be about 100 shares, $600. That was your average trade. A huge trade would be 200 shares, $1,200, right? So I started dialing and Danny started dialing. Danny got the first connection. So I put my phone down, I'm waiting, and I look out in the boardroom where Danny's sitting, and he puts the phone there for 2 minutes, and he comes in holding a buy ticket, and he's got this weird look on his face. He goes, the guy bought $120,000 worth of stock and apologized for working so small. And in that moment, I was like, oh, I made $60,000 in that one trade. In that moment, I knew I cracked the code. So essentially, by positioning it with a well-known stock first and an unknown stock second, you would cross over that barrier of when someone trusts you or doesn't trust you. That first trade established trust, and then you would cross over to the second trade and make the money. And that was the beginning of Stratton. But what happened was when I then went out into the boardroom and said, guys, we're done calling moms and pops. Now you're all going to start calling the richest 1%. And what happened next was staggering. After 4 weeks of trying, the 12 kids had not closed one single account, not even one. Meanwhile, my closing rate was 50% and Danny's was in the low 30s. We were calling the same people, making the same presentations, selling the same stock, same leads, same everything. I'm closing 50%, making a million a month. They're making zero. That was the question. So now, what was it? Well, eventually, after traveling around the world and reading all the books on sales, and I quickly found out that the other my program at the point didn't have a name, but the other ones were far worse than mine, and mine wasn't good enough. It forced me into this one evening where I had this long 4-hour marathon training session with my 12 guys who had not closed a sale in 4 weeks. And it was on this night that I stumbled upon the straight line system. Out of sheer necessity, I was forced to invent a new way of selling by phone or in person. And here's what it came down to. The fundamental concept was that every sale is the same. There are these core elements that must line up in every sale before you have any chance of a prospect saying yes. These 5 core elements, 5 in all, right? Now, sometimes in the easier sales, when you deal with easy people to sell to, some people are easier to sell to, there can be only 3, but there's always these same elements. What are they? Well, guess what they are? They're the same things that had stopped even me from being able to close rich people selling them a $6 stock from Stratton Oakmont. In other words, we have what's called the 3 10s. And that's, imagine a 1 and a 10. A 1 is it's on a continuum of certainty. A 1 means they're totally uncertain, and a 10 means they're absolutely certain. So if someone that's at a 10 for the product you're selling, says, oh my God, I love that product. That's the best product in the world. I think it's the best deal. I just love that price. It's a 10, right? A 1 would be, it's the biggest piece of shit ever. I would never buy that product. That's total garbage. If I use it, it's going to break. It sucks. It's terrible. That's a 1. That's a 10, right? So obviously, where do you want someone on that scale when you ask for the order? Where do you want them? As close to a 10 as possible, obviously, right? Well, guess what? When you're selling someone a penny stock they never heard of, where do they start? Because that's your product. Where do they start on that continuum? They start really low down. They never heard of it. They don't know about it. They probably heard penny stocks suck. They're too speculative. They probably start at a 1, 2, or 3. Versus when you start off with a blue chip company, where do they start? Probably at a 7 or an 8 or a 9, because they've already heard about the company. They know that blue chip stocks are typically good investments. So I'm entering that scale at a 10. So watch, let's just say that you're on a call with someone. This is the mistake you're all making on the telephone. I'll tell you right now, this is what you're doing wrong. Let's say you get someone, you explain the company. You say exactly what it is and all the features, benefits, value proposition, cost benefit ratio, right? And when you're done, you have them at pretty much a 10 or close to a 10 on the certainty scale. The question is, will they buy from you? Yes or no? No. The answer is actually not yes, it's maybe. No. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Because what if in the process of making them certain, you said something or you did something that pissed them off and made them not trust you? Do people buy from those they don't trust? Of course not. So it's not enough that they love the company. They must also trust and connect with you, the salesperson. And we have a 1 and a 10 for that. A 10 would be, hey, what do you think of that salesperson? Oh my God, they're the greatest salesperson in the world. They're totally trustworthy. They give great value. They're always there. They solve my problems. I would never buy from anybody else. That's a 10. A 1 would be, they're the biggest snake in the grass liar. I don't trust that person as far as I could throw them. I never would do it. That's a 1. So where do you want them on the continuum when you ask for the order? As close to a 10 as possible, right? So let's say you do that. You have them, they trust you. They really trust you. They trust the product. But what if they don't trust the company that stands behind the product? They've heard bad things about the company. You have a third 10 for the company. 1 means they hate the company. 10 means they love it. I'm gonna keep it quick here, right? Your goal as an influencer, as you're moving someone down the straight line, as the phrase goes, from the open to the close, right? Your goal, what you're looking to do is to corral this 10, 10, 10 in a single moment in time. Now, let's go back now to what happened when I couldn't close. Even me, I couldn't close people that had never met me before. They didn't know me, so they're a very low level of certainty. They did not know the $6 stock, very little certainty. They didn't know Stratton Oakmont. So it's starting off with a 1, 2, 1, almost impossible. But by starting off with a more well-known company and then reframing and having a reason why they hadn't heard of you, you move them up on the certainty scale. So you're starting from a much better spot. What ends up happening with most people on the phone is this. Those 3 core elements that must line up in every sale, because if even one of them is missing, you basically have no shot of closing. We do not buy from people we don't trust. We do not buy products that we think are going to make our life worse. We don't. I hate that product. Oh, buy it. You don't do it. You buy things that you think will make your life better, not worse. And you do not buy from companies that you don't trust. You think are going to screw you. But what essentially happens on the telephone is that, number one, your job, when you pick up that phone or when you walk in someone's door, question, where is the prospect on the certainty scale for each of those 3 tens? Where are they? Answer, who the hell knows? How could you possibly know? Unless you're a mind reader, how do you know? Because here's what it represents. It represents all their preconceived notions, what they've seen about your product, what they've heard about your product, what they've heard about your industry, what they think about salesmen, the way they think you look the moment they lay on. There's so many variables. You cannot possibly know where someone is on the certainty scale for these 3 tens. There's no way to know. But what you do know is they're somewhere. They're somewhere between a 1 and a 10. Why? Because they're from planet Earth. They know about cars. They know about whatever you're selling. The second they realize what the context is, their brain instantly says, he's selling me X, Y, Z. Here's how I feel about that industry. Here's how I feel about this company. Here's how I feel about this individual. Their brain instantly will use everything it's ever seen, heard, known, experienced, and make a decision. So the moment the sale begins, the moment you pick up the phone, they say hello, and you say, hi, I'm calling from XYZ company, their brain's up. They're calling about logistics. They're calling about cars. They're calling about insurance. They're like, oh, really? They might, depending on their excuse, they're somewhere. And then your job, your goal, your responsibility as an influencer is what you're doing is you're essentially trying to transfer the certainty that you have inside you, meaning that you know as a salesperson that your product is the best, that you are the most trustworthy, that your company is the most trustworthy. When you sell someone, what do you think you're doing? What you're doing is you're transferring the certainty that you have inside of you through words, through tonality, through body language. And by the way, there is body language on the phone, even if they can't see you. But many times we can use Zoom like this and you can see body language. But what you're doing is through words, through tonality, through body language, you are essentially transferring the certainty that you have to that other person and raising them up on the certainty scale. You're raising up their level of certainty. In order to do that, you have to get them listening to you. You have to get them actually open up to the possibility of being influenced. And here's where most people fall down on the phone. You have 4 seconds. In the first 4 seconds of a phone call, you must be perceived as being, number 1, sharp as a tack. Number 2, enthusiastic as hell. Number 3, an expert in your field. Sharp as a tack, enthusiastic as hell, an expert in your field. If you are perceived that way, what happens? Well, number 1, people will defer to you. Because when we're in the presence of experts, okay, he's an expert, she's an expert, great. I will listen. I will allow myself to be guided in a certain way. So what was happening, see, when I tried to get my 12 Strattonites, the first 12, to close rich people, After 1 month, they had not closed a single person. Meanwhile, Danny and I'm closing 50%, he's closing 30. What I realized is I had a certain way of talking, a certain way of using my voice, that in those first few seconds of the conversation, people were perceiving me a certain way. And they're like, damn, that guy's sharp, he's an expert. And they listen. And once you capture that positioning as an expert, it now opens up the possibility to influence. And when I say influence, meaning for you to say things, show them things, do things, explain things in a way that raises up their level of certainty for those first 3 tenths. They must love the product, trust and connect with you, trust the company that stands behind the product. If one of those three things is missing from the equation, you're done. And they will not, and what you'll hear, what you won't hear is, I don't trust your company, or I don't like you. That when you ask for the order, they don't say, sorry, Jordan, I'm just not certain about your product. I don't trust you. You know what I say? Oh, it sounds good. Let me think about it. Oh yeah, it sounds great. Can you send me some more information? Well, great. I got to speak to my wife first. Well, great. Let me call you back. It's a bit. That's when the common objections start to pop up. They're smoke screens for uncertainty. That's what objections are. They're smoke screens for uncertainty. And what ends up happening is that this is the point where most sales will go into a death spiral. They try to overcome an objection, but remember, someone says, I want to think about it. So that if you try to say to them, well, you don't really need to think about it, right? But blah, 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 whatever reason you say, why they shouldn't be thinking about it right now. And you ask for the order again, they're just going to hop to a new objection, because that wasn't what was really holding them back. What was holding them back was a lack of certainty for either 1, 2, or all 3 of these 3 tenths. Once you realize what's going on as a salesperson, see, I understand why people say, let me think about it, why they don't buy now. Once you realize that, it opens up a whole universe of possibilities. Now, one of the first steps in the straight line system, which I teach, by the way, which is wildly effective for this, is that number 1, you must take immediate control of the sale. Step 1, you must take control. Now, when I say control, that doesn't mean you talk. What it means is you come off, you sound like an expert, you're positioned as an expert, and as a result of that, people defer to you. And then you use that positioning to start asking people questions. And you start asking questions in certain orders, in certain patterns, using certain tonalities. And as people answer, you're like, yep, and you engage in what's called active listening. And by doing that, you build massive rapport with them. See, what most salespeople think constitutes rapport is actually repulsive. In a home, face to face, you can get away with certain things with rapport building, which is why right now, when you go into homes and you're more effective, it's because you're relying on very poor sales tactics, but they still will kind of barely get you by, oh, there's a nice fish on the wall. Oh my God, what a beautiful sofa. What a nice coffee. I mean, all the things that you do when you go into a home, that's not ultimately why they buy from you. Trust me, that's got nothing to do with that. All you're doing is you're biding time for, there's a natural magnetic pull when 2 people are in the same location that you can eventually get into rapport if you're not completely socially inept, right? That evaporates on the phone. So the way you build rapport on the phone and the way you build rapport in person is entirely different. And just so you know, let me just say this. I still build rapport the same way when I'm in someone's home. But the point is, you simply can't cheat it when you're on the phone. So when I'm in someone's home, I still use the same straight line techniques. I might pepper on some little basic things about making comments about things I see and stuff like that. But that's not what rules the day. What rules the day, when people are in rapport, is because they said to themselves, I like this person and I trust this person. They trust you. And they sense they just kind of like you, meaning not like you as you're exactly alike, but you see things the same way, you process the same way. These are the things you must accomplish with the straight line.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we have gotten an overwhelming amount of responses in the Q&A section, which we will go to in just a little bit. But Jordan, thank you so much for all the actionable insights. You certainly had me sold. I was just sitting there, very much paying attention to every word that you were saying. Do you have any immediate advice for, like, we've all been on these calls, you just mentioned it, could you send over some information? I have to talk to a colleague or a wife or a friend or something like that. If you get to that point, are there any turning back there, or is the sale just lost? How would you react in a situation like that?
1 second, I gotta have someone bring me a charger before this thing ends. Give me 1 second. Matt.
Okay, wonderful. Well, just wanted to let all of you guys know that we will get to all the Q&As here in just a bit. So please keep them coming, and thank you for all the comments as well. Like I mentioned in the beginning, we will have the handout section as well, where you can take a look at Jordan's courses as well. But yeah, Jordan, you were saying.
Everybody who's listening, I'm giving a free gift to everyone here. It's the introductory module to this straight line certification program I have. We actually, it's really based for companies and individual salespeople too. Incredibly effective, life-changing, and we do, it's part of what we call. We have our company actually. We hire salespeople. We deliver trained salespeople to companies in mass. That's our business. We actually train them first and deliver salespeople to companies, and they all go through this incredible program, and it makes them into world-class closers. So to answer your question, you said, repeat it again, just so I know exactly what you want to hear now. Repeat it again.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned that we've all been in situations where we've been on the calls, right? You have people excited, but they're just not ready to just buy now, right? They have to see some info. They need to talk to a colleague or a friend or their wife or something like that. When you get to a point of the sale like that, do you then simply accept that it's lost, or what do you do to sort of give them that urgency to act now, right here, right on the call with you?
Right. Well, what I do basically is I never, when someone says to you, let me think about it, let me call you back, bad time of year, right? So what is that? First of all, what does that mean? It's a smoke screen for uncertainty. When they're saying they're not certain, and when they say, let me think about what things, I need to think about it so I can become more certain. I'm not certain. I need to think about things I'm not certain enough yet. I need to make myself more certain. Send me some information so I can read through it and make myself more certain and not at a high enough level of certainty. So when someone says to me, if I give a presentation and I ask for the order and they say, it sounds really good, let me think about it, right? My exact words are, I hear what you're saying, but let me ask you a question. I understand you want to think about it, but let me ask you this. Does the idea make sense to you? Do you like the program? And notice my tonality is like, well, let me ask you a question. Do you like the program? No. I'm like, let me ask you, do you like the program? You know what they'll say to me? They'll say, yeah, it sounds pretty good. Now, for the first time, I know where they are on the certainty scale. They're like, yeah, it sounds pretty good. They're like at a 6. They say, yeah, it sounds okay. They're at a 4. If they say, oh my God, it sounds really good, they're at an 8. But now at least I know where they are in terms of product. I said, does the program make sense to you? Let's say I'm selling an insurance product. Does the idea make sense? Do you like the product? And they say, yeah, it sounds pretty good. I say, okay, they're like a 7, right? I say, exactly. It really is a great idea. In fact, now watch. If I say, in fact, it really is a great idea, and then I try to convince them for some reason, okay, they wanted to think about it, right? And I say, listen, I'm doing this for a long time. And one thing I know is that if you want to think about it, you want to call me back, you'll end up putting this in the back of your mind and you'll decide against it. You're a busy guy. You go back to your busy life. I'm busy. You're busy. We'll be like 2 ships passing in the night and we'll never speak again. So just give me one shot. All I'm asking for, if you try to overcome an objection by actually answering the objection, you're never going to close the person. Never. Because all they're going to do is then they'll say, well, good. I just got to talk to my wife. They'll hop to a new objection. People hop from objection to objection. You don't answer an objection. You don't overcome an objection and ask for the order. What you do is you loop back into presentation mode and build more certainty. So when someone says to me, well, if it's the first time, they'll say, I want to think about it. I say, I understand you want to think about it, but let me just ask you a question. Does the idea itself make sense to you? Do you like the idea? And they say, yeah, it sounds pretty. I say, exactly. In fact, it really is a great program. In fact, the true beauty is, and then I have a secondary presentation that even is more powerful than the first. And I start explaining why my product. So while I said, yeah, I like the idea, I give them more benefits, more features, more value. I give them this bulletproof case that's laser guided to what their pain points are. And when I'm done with that secondary pattern, I say, you see what I'm saying, Bill? Does it make sense to you now? And now I'll say, oh, no, yeah, it's great. I say, exactly. So now the second time when I re-asked, so I asked him the question the first time, does the idea make sense to you? He says, yeah, it sounds pretty good. But then when I loop back and I represent the idea again and I build more certainty, I say, you see what I'm saying now, Bill? Does it make sense? He says, oh my God, no, it's great, it's excellent. I say, exactly. It really is an amazing. Now I have him at maybe an 8.5 or 9. I moved up his level of certainty. I've actually convinced, I've sold him on the first 10 that the idea itself. And I say, now I'm not going to ask the other. I say, Bill, let me ask you another question. If I've been your insurance broker for the last 3 or 4 years, saving you money on a consistent basis, saying putting you into policy, every policy I put you into was just a grand slam home run. And now I came to you with this. You probably wouldn't be saying, let me think about it, John. You'd be saying, how do I get started right now? Am I right, Bill? And now that he'll say, well, yeah, obviously, if I knew you and you were my broker for 3, of course, I say, exactly. Now that I can understand, Bill. You don't know me. I don't have the luxury of a track record. Let me take a moment and then I'll actually go and tell him, let me reintroduce myself, tell him more about myself. And now I'm going to sell the second 10. Remember, there's 3 10s. What I'm doing here is I'm raising up his level of certainty for all 3 items. He's now told me he loves the idea. Yes, you're right. I do love the idea. Now I talk about myself again and how I have this already planned out. And I've already written. See, the thing about the probe with the straight lines, what we do is we have templates. And you put these, you have your responses in templates. You templatize it. So let me diverge for a second here because it's a great story. I was once given a test. All right. It was a mock test by a psychologist of how to close. And what they did is they called in a CEO of a fictitious company. And unbeknownst to me, they paid him to say no. No matter how hard I tried to close him, he was supposed to say yes. Right? They handed me a dossier, and this is online. You can find this online. It's called Jordan Belfort Dairy Sales. It's a true story, and actually you can look it up on YouTube. Jordan Belfort Dairy Sale, live selling, right? They called the guy. They said, "Here's a dossier on this fictitious company. On this, I was working at some fictitious investment bank. They gave me a dossier on his company, and I started reading it. And 5 minutes later, said, "Are you ready?" I said, "I need more time." I ended up taking an hour and a half of my time, and I said, "All right, now I'm ready." The guy came in 20 minutes later. After he said no 3 or 4 times, I closed him. And the psychologists were all in the room and they started laughing hysterically. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Well, I didn't know that he'd been paid to say no. And I still closed the guy. Even though they told him you cannot say yes, I still got him to say yes. So, okay, fair enough. I'm a great salesman. But here's the interesting thing. You know what they said to me? We've done this test with 50 other salespeople. No one ever spent more than 3 minutes reviewing the material. I spent an hour and a half. You know why? Because I wrote out templates. I wrote out all these different things. I already had my entire pitch planned out with my loops back, how I was going to sell myself, how I would sell the company, what was my, with the straight line system, we engage in what's called strategic preparation. So you know what you're going to say about yourself, not once, but 2 or 3 times. And then lastly, and after I'm done talking about myself, I say, and as far as my company goes, XYZ company, and I resell my company. And then after I sold all 3 10s, so I buttoned up the 3 10s, I said, why don't you do this, Bill? Since it's our first time working together, I'm asking you to give me one shot, get started small. And all I ask is this, is that in 6 months from now, when you see what a great job I've done, that you give me referrals. That's how my business truly grows. Does that sound fair enough? And I shut up. In other words, I always loop back into a close. So that's how with the straight line system, we don't try to overcome objections. We build more, we answer an objection, and we use that as an opportunity to loop back into the sale, into presentation mode, and we represent the idea again, and we build on top of the certainty that we've already created. You don't take someone from a 2 to a 10 in 1 hour dissertation. You can't do that. That's not how human beings are built. So you might take someone starts at a 3, you might get it from a 3 to a 6 during your first presentation. People don't buy when they're at a 6. They want to be at 8, 9, or 10. So they say, let me think about it. They don't tell you. It would be nice. It would be really nice if you could pitch someone that say, Jordan, I don't trust you, and I don't like your company. Well, our mommies and our daddies told us to be more polite than that. Just tell the salesman you want to think about it and call him back. That's how you get rid of a salesman. That's what we've been taught to do. So what I do is when I hear, let me call you back, in my mind, I say, all right, it's just a smoke screen for uncertainty. I say, I understand you want to call me back. I've been doing this a long time. Callbacks don't really work. You're busy. I'm busy. We'll be 2 ships passing in the night. I say, in fact, let me say this. And then I loop back. The true beauty of the situation is, and I'll represent the idea again in a more compelling way to raise up their level of certainty. It's very miraculous. You watch someone who's giving you 4 objections. They said, let me think about it. Then they switch to let me call you back. They switch to the wife. And suddenly that last thing you said, that last loop, as we call it, got you certain enough. They say, all right, fine, I'll do it. Most people I close is after the 3rd objection. And with the straight line system, you're able to do all of that without breaking rapport. That's the key. By using tonality, body language in person, and on the phone, we can do it Zoom especially, you don't break rapport. That's the secret.
Jordan, you know how the saying goes, time flies when you're having fun, and we are almost at the end of it. But I do want to address one additional question from the Q&A section before we go to our so-called lightning round, where we will ask you some top of the mind questions and offer a very limited and exclusive offer only for viewers, which also includes a free introduction to your course, which you just offered there. So absolutely tons of value to get there. But Jordan, I think most of the people have also tried to recruit salespeople. And one of the questions that we have gotten from Gavin, I think it's a wonderful question. He asks, what qualities do you look for in someone when you're considering someone for a sales role? What do you have a feel? What qualities, what competencies are you looking for?
So I actually, my company, my whole business model right now is shifted. All I do is recruit salespeople for companies. That's my whole business.
Yeah.
So I recruit for companies because people are so bad. People don't know how to. Listen, here's the problem with it. Ready? There's 2 problems. Number one, let me worry. Here's the bad results: massive attrition, poor first-year performance. That's what everyone suffers from sales. Poor first-year performance, terrible attrition. Right? The way we resolve that is I actually do the hiring for companies. I go out, they use my brand name. I have that story I told you about the dairy company was actually, I worked for about a year with psychologists to develop something called the JBSCI, the Jordan Belfort Sales Competency Index. It's an actual psychometric test specific for selling based on my DNA and the DNA of top producers. And we're able to use this test to sift people out. Then we put them through 3 layers of behavioral interviewing. And then I hire them for a company conditionally, though. They have to go through a boot camp. They have to go through 3 to 4 weeks of training in a classroom before they start. And if they don't graduate, the job offer disappears. So now what you have is your sales will show up at your company already trained and already ready to kick ass, and they've already paid, and they pay for the training, by the way. I make them invest some of their own money in the training because I found that if people don't have an investment in their own training, they don't give a shit, right? So that's how I've solved this company. And I have massive companies that I do the recruiting for, and the result that we get is so much better than anyone else because A, I know how to pick them better, and B, once they get picked, they still have to go through about a month of training. If they don't make it through the training, They never show up at the companies. That's what I do for companies. And I only offer this in the US today, but we're actually about to start bringing it to the rest of the world. But here's the deal. If you're doing it yourself and you can't call because you're outside the country right now, here's what you got to do. Number one is don't try to take salespeople and just put them out without training them first. There's no way that it's like a 1 in 50 shot that the person that you've recruited is like me. You could drop me into any company and I would learn it in one day and be the top producer. That's very rare. There's so many talented people out there who fail in sales because they weren't trained correctly first. You cannot hire and ask them to do. They have to go through certain types of training, and that training can't just be sales training. It's got to be mindset training. There's a mindset to success. So during that 4 weeks, I'm reprogramming their brains to dial the phone 300 times a day, knock on 1,000 doors, let rejection slide off their back, become like to eat rejection for breakfast. Like it's this constant and you reprogram someone to be tough, to have resiliency. There's one quality I would say that you must have in your sales role: resiliency. Resiliency. I test them for resiliency, and then I make them go through, like almost like the Navy SEALs, it makes you go through BUD/S training. I put them through hell before they show up at a company. And I know the ones that stick, those ones, and my success rate is 95%. And I also get, and by the way, if I place a salesman in your company and they don't make it 90 days, they suck, I replace them for free. That's how I do it. So if you're doing it yourself, do this. Number one, make sure you test for resiliency. Make sure you test them. I also test for tonality. I give them tone. I make them I make every candidate. I have a way. We sift through about 100. I would say, right, this. I would say 100,000 candidates per month we sift through. Right as of today, 100,000 a month, and we probably pick about 1,000 out of 100. Really, 1 out of 100 makes it through. But once we get down to the last like 3,000 or 4,000, you know what I do? I send them something that says, "Hi, my name is so and so. I am destined to be a top producer in my field. I will work." I make them pitch me about why they are the most resilient, the most hardest working. I will knock on more doors. I make them sign it. I make them say it. So there's all these things, as I've learned over the years, that, you know, I go into these companies, they pay me to fix the problem. And sometimes half the people who are there should have never been hired in the first place. And there's a lot of them there that could be good, but they got into such bad habits when they first started. So those are the things I recommend. Anyway, let me give you the link for the free training for everyone. It's jordanbelfort.com/president summit. For those of you interested in the US in recruiting, you could just ask for Matt at Jordan Belfort, Matt at jordanbelfort.com.
And Jordan, let me know when you're ready to hit Europe. We'll host something at President Summit, and we'll make a thing out of it. So I'm just waiting for your call, man. Anyway,
when they'll let me hit Europe.
Amazing. Before we round off completely, let's go to the lightning round, where we will also limit up the very exclusive offer right now. Not only do you get all the free stuff that Jordan just mentioned, we will also give a discounted ticket exclusively for listeners for the President's Summit on the 23rd and 24th of November, where many other actionable takeaways, such as those that Jordan just displayed, will be announced. You will also get a book from Jordan, The Way of the Wolf, which we will hand out there. And last and not least, you will also get access to an exclusive VIP sit down with the global CEO of Bain & Company, actually. So absolutely.
My training is available in Spanish. I saw we have it in Spanish too, by the way, just so you know.
There we go. There we go. So there's absolutely no excuse right now. But I should say the offer will only last for as long as Jordan will answer these questions. So he decides from now on. But Jordan, if you're ready, then let's go.
You got it. There.
The first question is, what is the best advice you've ever gotten?
Delay your gratification.
Delay your gratification. Okay.
Yeah, don't try to focus just on making as much as you can, as fast as you can. You want to essentially delay. Good things take time. You don't have to make it all at once.
Absolutely. Second question would be, favorite scene from The Wolf of Wall Street?
For me, it's the speech. You know, the speech that he gives with the Steve Madden shoes. That's an actual. that I gave, and yeah, that's probably it's got to be for me the most accurate. It was literally a word for word.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And the third question is, what person inspires you the most at the moment? Doesn't have to be all time, but just at the moment.
Roger Federer.
Roger Federer.
Absolutely. Guy, I mean, like he's almost
Why?
40 years old, he's still going. I mean, guys, most athletes, when they make it that big, they have a scandal at some point. This guy is scandal free, graceful, elegant. He's just the best.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I know you play a bit of tennis yourself, right?
I do.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Well, the fourth and final question would be best purchase under $200. Your best purchase under $200
Of anything ever, or my program?
of anything ever.
Wow! Oh my God! I'd probably say it would be a ticket I got to the Grateful Dead concert.
A ticket you got for the certainly a first on the masterclass series here, but makes a ton of sense.
Best memory I ever had in my life is going to a concert with the Grateful Dead. Yep.
And that I guess that says quite a bit. Wonderful. We are almost at the end here, Jordan. We are actually a little over time, so I want to say absolutely amazing to round off this masterclass this way. And thank you so much for tuning in and sharing these memorable, actionable insights with us. It's been a true pleasure, and I want to say welcome to Andy from the UK, Simon from Denmark, Sophia from Germany, Manny from Italy, Henrik from Sweden, and all the other people who are right now securing their tickets and programs. So absolutely amazing. Jordan, thank you so much, and yeah, let me know when you're ready for Europe.
Take care.
Thank you for your time.